The rain was falling the way grief does, suddenly, heavily, without warning, soaking everything it touched. Cars hissed by on the wet road, the street lights flickered against the storm, and at the bus stop on the corner of Maple and Fifth, a single father named Ethan Bennett pulled his little daughter closer, trying to shield her from the cold. He had no way of knowing that within the next few minutes, a stranger would stumble into their lives, drenched, trembling, and carrying a story that would crack open the walls around his heart, walls he had spent years building just to survive. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the quiet power of helping strangers, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. It truly supports the channel and keeps stories like this alive. The first thing Ethan noticed about the girl was how young she looked. Early 20s at most, though her soaked hair and hunched posture made her look smaller, almost childlike. She wasn't running for shelter the way most people did. She wasn't checking her phone or searching for a ride. She was just standing there in the rain, hugging her arms around herself, blinking back tears that the weather tried to hide. She looked lost, invisible, like she wasn't sure she had a right to be anywhere at all. Ethan would later admit that if he'd been alone, he might have convinced himself to mind his own business. But his daughter, Lily, 7 years old, bright-eyed, and somehow always wiser than she looked, was the first to tug on his hand and whisper that they should help her. Maybe it was because children haven't learned how to look away yet. Maybe it was because Lily had inherited her mother's kindness, the kind Ethan feared would fade one day because she barely remembered her. Either way, Lily stepped toward the girl, her tiny pink raincoat shining against the gray afternoon, and simply asked if she was okay. It was the sort of pure, unfiltered question only a child could ask without sounding intrusive. Ethan watched the girl's lips tremble, then press tightly together as if holding back a dam of emotion. She wasn't okay. That much was obvious. The girl didn't speak, not at first. Her throat bobbed, her gaze flickered to Ethan as if asking permission to fall apart. He nodded gently, giving her a quiet space to breathe. He had learned, after losing his wife, that sometimes the greatest kindness was simply giving someone room to exist without explaining themselves. The bus shelter wasn't much. Just glass, metal, and a wooden bench, but to the girl, it must have felt safer than the open street. She stepped under its cover, dripping rainwater, holding her purse tightly as if it were the last secure thing in her life. Ethan peeled off his own hoodie, ignoring the cold shock to his skin, and draped it over her shoulders. She startled at the gesture, then sank into it, shivering quietly. He wasn't trying to be a hero. He wasn't trying to fix anything. He had no idea what she was carrying, but he could see she needed warmth, and sometimes that was enough. The storm worsened, pounding against the glass. Lily clung to Ethan's side, watching the girl with a mixture of curiosity and concern. It wasn't long before the girl's tears finally broke through, mingling with the rain on her face. It was the kind of crying that came from somewhere deep, where memories cut like shards of glass. Ethan didn't ask questions. He simply said there was a cafe nearby where it was warm, and she was welcome to join them until the storm passed. She nodded as if afraid to speak, her voice too brittle to use. They walked together, Ethan holding Lily's hand, the girl trailing beside them like a fallen leaf caught in a current. The cafe was a tiny, tucked-away place with foggy windows and the smell of espresso drifting through the door. The owner, who had known Ethan since before Lily was born, took one look at the drenched trio and quietly handed them towels without asking for payment. The girl sat at the far corner table, shoulders still shaking with the aftershocks of emotion. Her hands trembled as she wrapped them around the warm mug Ethan ordered for her. Lily sat close to her father, drawing small circles on the table with her fingertip, glancing occasionally at the stranger, as if trying to figure out how to make her smile again. Half an hour passed in silence before the girl finally spoke. She didn't give her name at first. She simply said she had nowhere to go, no one to call, and that she hadn't been planning to come to the bus stop at all. She had been walking, just walking with no destination, because if she stopped moving, she feared she would break apart completely. Ethan listened, pulse tightening. He recognized that kind of exhaustion, the kind that didn't come from physical tiredness, but from life grinding someone down until they felt hollow. Little by little, like a hesitant tide, the girl opened up. Her name was Maya. She had grown up in foster homes, aged out of the system with no safety net, and had recently fled an environment where she had been manipulated and emotionally torn down by people who claimed to care about her. She hadn't eaten since the day before. She had lost her job, lost her roommates, and that morning she had woken up to find her belongings dumped outside the apartment she couldn't afford. She had carried everything she owned in the purse she held so close. Ethan felt something inside him shift, pain mixing with anger, sorrow mixing with empathy. He didn't know Maya, but he knew what it looked like when someone had been failed by everyone who should have helped her. He knew what it felt like to lose almost everything. He had lost his wife 3 years earlier in a car accident that shattered his world. He remembered the nights spent on the bathroom floor because the bed was too empty. The mornings he forced himself to smile for Lily's sake. The days he felt invisible, like grief made him fade from the world. Watching Maya, he realized he wasn't the only one who had walked through storms. The cafe grew quieter as the day faded. Rain still tapped against the windows, but now it felt like a soft background rhythm rather than a threat. Ethan noticed how Maya's shoulders slowly relaxed, how her breathing steadied, how her eyes, though still sad, held a small flicker of relief. But she kept insisting she didn't want to be a burden, that she would leave soon, that she didn't deserve kindness. Ethan told her, not with speeches, but with the calm sincerity of someone who understood darkness, that she wasn't a burden, that sometimes a stranger, kindness could be the turning point in a person's story, that she didn't need to rush back into the storm. He didn't tell her everything about his past, but he told her enough for her to see she wasn't the only one who had known loss. Maya cried again, quieter this time, softer, like tears of release instead of despair. The cafe eventually dimmed its lights as closing time approached. Lily had fallen asleep against Ethan's side. Maya looked up when she noticed the waiter removing chairs from tables, her expression tightening with fear, as if she expected to be told to leave, to go back into the rain and figure things out alone. But something unexpected happened. The waiter, an older man with kind eyes, removed his apron, glanced from Ethan to Maya, and sat down beside them. He had overheard pieces of the conversation and said gently that the world could be cruel, but there were still people who refused to look away. He offered Maya a warm place to stay. His sister ran a shelter for young women, safe, welcoming, nothing like the harsh places she had known. He said he could call ahead, make sure they had a bed ready for her. Maya's breath hitched. Hope was a fragile thing, and she didn't know if she was allowed to hold it. Ethan nodded, reassuring her that she didn't have to decide alone. She could take the first small step. He would help her get. He wasn't trying to change her life. He just didn't want her to walk back into the darkness she came from. When they finally stepped outside, the rain had softened into a quiet drizzle. Streetlights reflected in puddles, casting gentle glows on the wet pavement. The world felt cleaner somehow, washed by the storm. Ethan drove Maya to the shelter. Lily slept in the back seat, her head resting against the window, unaware of how her simple question, "Are you okay?" had changed someone's life. Maya sat in the front, Ethan's hoodie still around her shoulders, and for the first time since they met, she wasn't shivering. At the shelter's entrance, she hesitated. Her voice shook when she thanked him, saying no one had ever shown her the kindness he had, especially not without wanting something in return. Ethan swallowed back the lump in his throat and told her something he wished someone had told him when his world had collapsed, that people deserved help even when they felt unworthy of it. That being lost didn't mean being beyond saving, and that storms didn't last forever, not for anyone. Maya stepped toward the door, paused, and looked back with eyes shining from something deeper than tears. Gratitude, relief, the beginning of healing. Ethan drove home that night with Lily sleeping peacefully beside him and a quiet sense of something shifting inside his chest. Not everything was fixed. Nothing had magically healed. But something had opened, something that had been locked since the night he lost his wife. Helping Maya didn't erase his grief, but it reminded him that hearts weren't meant to stay closed forever, that kindness had a way of stitching people back together, that even the smallest act could change the direction of someone's life. And somewhere inside him, a warmth began to grow, proof that even shattered hearts could still answer the rain with compassion. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support helps keep these powerful true-to-life stories coming. Before we end, comment below, kindness changes everything. Ethan never saw Maya as a burden. He saw her as someone standing where he once had stood, at the edge of breaking. And by choosing to help her, he found healing for himself in a place he least expected, in the rain, at a bus stop, because his daughter asked a simple question. Sometimes the smallest kindness becomes the turning point not just in one life but in two.